Hello everyone and welcome back to another Stately Office Hours. This is when we, Stately, talk to you about what we've been working on in the last week, answer your questions and get feedback from you. If you have any questions or anything you want to share with us, you can tweet us using hashtag Stately Office Hours. You can use the live chat in the YouTube comments, or you can join our Discord if you're not there already. And that is at discord.gg/xstate. And we have a dedicated office hours channel there. So anything you say, I will be keeping my eye out for it so that I can bring you into the conversation. Let's start off, as we often do, introducing ourselves so that if you've not joined us before, you know who we are and why we're talking about Stately and Xstate. I'm Laura Kalbag. I do the developer and designer advocacy for Stately. David, you go next.
All right. I'm David Khorshid. I'm the founder of Stately, creator of Xstate, and reviewer of all of Matt's awesome PRs to the editor.
Matt next then.
I'm the lowly code contributor to the Stately editor. I'm having the time of my life right now, I've got to say. It's really fun.
Okay, we're going left to right. So Anderist, Mateusz, who are you?
I'm Anderist, open source maintainer, CEO of CodePoet, contractor to Stately, junior developer, jacks of all trades, or at least some of them.
It's a pretty fancy title.
It is. Farzad,
I have
how about
all
you?
of them on my business card.
Nice.
Hello all, I'm Farzad, just a humble engineer in a Stately.
Nothing humble about you. So this week we asked the question about testing. We want to talk about testing. A lot of people have been asking us to talk a little bit more about what we think about testing with Xstate. And so our question was, do you use state machines for planning or implementing testing for your projects? And like last week, we actually have loads of good questions that came through on Discord. So we've not got the visual for that. But what I will do is I'm going to read the questions and you lot can give me some answers, please, because I want to learn more about testing as well. And some feedback too, because some of these are more comments and questions. So let's start off with Steve OH or Steve O on Discord said, I'm a very long way from anything resembling an MVP, minimal viable product, but I've started looking into the feasibility of using a TLA plus spec as the source of a test model for Xstate/test. Now, I don't know what a TLA plus spec is, so if anyone can enlighten me on that, and what are our thoughts on this?
Sure. So TLA plus is a formal modeling language, or it's for it. There's something called formal methods, and it's basically a mathematical way of describing an application so that you could run it through. I'm trying to find the best way to describe this, but yeah, it's a formal specification. You could basically mathematically prove that your application is correct and bug-free, which sounds cool, but it's a little bit trickier than it sounds. There's definitely a big learning curve. But one of the cool things about tools like TLA Plus and Alloy is that it basically does what Xstate Test sort of does, where it generates all of the possible states and transitions in your app and tries to find invariants and says, oh, hey, I found something that should be impossible. Or, hey, I know that this bug will happen if you do this series of events. So yeah, they're pretty cool tools. And there's actually the creator of TLA Plus. I'll put this website on a banner. This one right here. He has a series of videos on teaching TLA Plus, and they're actually pretty entertaining. And they help reduce the learning curve. But I highly recommend looking at them. He also talks about state machines a lot. So yeah, TLA Plus is really interesting.
Cool. And for anyone who hasn't yet tried Xstate testing, what do you get with it if you use it?
I can grab this one if you like. Xstate test is a way of taking a machine. Let's say we're testing, I don't know, Facebook or something, or Twitter. Let's say, who uses Facebook anymore? And we say, okay, we know that let's say when you first load the tweets, right, when you're looking at your own timeline, you have like a pending state, which is the state in which your tweets haven't loaded yet. Then you have a tweets loaded state, for instance. And then when you're in the tweets loaded state, you can scroll down and that will load more tweets, essentially. So we've got a couple of different states there. We've got the pending state and then we've got the tweets loaded state. We'll ignore the error for now. What XState test will do, if you make that into a machine, then it can, first of all, read the machine and use it to kind of execute tests on the thing that you're testing. So let's say you're using something like Cypress, which is an end-to-end test, piece of end-to-end test software, which kind of allows you to like drive a browser and kind of complete end-to-end tests and asserting things. Then what XState test will do is it will go, okay, you've got an event that links pending to loaded. So let's check we're in the pending state. Let's execute the load event or something similar. And then it will check that the tweets have loaded. So what it allows you to do is, as things grow in complexity, let's say that the tweets don't work, for instance, then it allows you to test that your UI looks correct, and it will walk through all possible paths, no matter how complicated your UI or your state machine gets. That means that you don't need to write individual tests anymore. What you do is you write assertions based on states, and you write kind of implementations based on events. So you need to implement like the scroll down event in Cypress. So when the machine calls scroll down, you go like cy.scroll, or Andreas will know better than me because he's the Cypress test master. But that's kind of what it does. It allows you to think more in terms of the model of what the test user is doing, as opposed to saying the machine should load the tweet, or the screen should load the tweets, the screen should error if this happens, which is really powerful because it allows you to be a lot more maintainable with your test suite, and it allows you to visualize your tests as well, which is kind of crazy. XState test is something that it's sort of in, like David can elucidate this a bit more, but it's in a state at the moment where we think we can improve it, but we just haven't quite found the time yet.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Right now, XState test requires you to create some sort of test model, and there's restrictions like not being able to test invoke services and things like that. And we really want to improve that, and also to expand what is tested and filtering the different scenarios that it creates, because something that's both an advantage and disadvantage to using XState test is the good news is that it's going to generate a ton of tests. The bad news is it's going to generate a ton of tests. So you really want to just like whittle that down into the most useful tests. And that's why other model-based testing tools, again, this is not a new idea at all, but other model-based testing tools have this idea of like, make sure all of the states are covered. So you're finding paths that touch all the states. Make sure all the transitions are covered. So like, even though you find a path from, here to here, you might be missing other transitions that could possibly be taken. So that's important as well. And then there's also test generation strategies for making sure that the data, or in XState terms, the context, fits certain constraints. So for example, if you have a counter application, you want to make sure that we're testing with really high numbers or with really low numbers and things like that. But the point is that this could all be automatically generated. And I think once you start learning about model-based testing, you realize like, wow, why am I manually writing just all of these tests? And realizing that you're just scratching the surface with the potential number of tests that you can and should be writing. So it is useful. But yeah, we do have room for improvements.
On the planning side too, I know that Farzad has some thoughts about this, which is models and state charts can in many ways replace generating user stories, and models can be much more powerful than user stories. Because have you ever tried to like user stories are fine for when you have a static thing that you're building, but have you ever tried to like take those user stories and then add or remove new ones, to reflect new features? It's kind of a horrible process. What do you think, Farzad?
I think the problem with user stories is that they're built to represent a linear process. There's no notion of going deep or going out and have like a Z index in terms of the behavior of the user in their application. Actually, about the Gherkin statements that are basically the de facto of how we write the user stories these days, Martin Fowler has a very, very great article on that, how that like intrinsically Gherkin statements are representing a small state machine. And the idea is that instead of describing your user stories in Gherkin statements, just write them in a familiar format or based on a spec, and then let us generate everything else based on that. So you, as a project manager, for example, can just deal with how you define the behavior of your application, and the rest can be visualized till the end, or even executed, right? We're using XState.
That is very cool.
And
What
that
other
link is
questions?
right there for you.
And so actually there's a related question here from Murat, who's asked quite a few great questions, but I think this one follows on specifically saying, any tips or advice on test generation? Like while I'm making a model or machine, there's some NodeMon watchers and they generate some happy path, sad path suites or placeholders for them. The usual test, something like OpenAPI does when it generates tests. So it's quite a big leap to go from what we've already got in the documentation to something like that. Does that make sense?
Sort of, yeah. So we have a few ideas around this, and this has also been a common ask, and I believe we talked about this in a previous office hours, where basically the same state machines that people create for their applications are the ones that they do want to use to test the application. And so the previous advice has been like, no, make a separate test machine that's sort of a flatter representation. But the more I think about it, the more I feel it makes sense if people are using state machines for their implementation to use that to at least help generate the test model for your application as well, because you have all the information there. You have all the states it could be in, all of the events that could happen. So it could at least be a starting point. And that's something that we're definitely exploring. On the other side, where you have an application that doesn't use state machines, we're also thinking about some ideas of like just creating a state machine based on your app's behavior, and so automatically generating the state machine. So that's something that I'm still experimenting with. I have an internal repo with our team called The Algorithm, which, for lack of a better name, that's just what I called it. That sort of explores this idea. But I think it could be really powerful where, you don't have to create state machines. You could just, give it an existing application and have the state machine generated from that. Even if it's not a perfect state machine and it's not expected to be, it's definitely a start. And you could use that for generating tests or documentation or understanding the behavior of your application.
Well, while we're at it, David, we might as well create a kind of like an auditing tool that lets you, browse in the sitemap of your website or application and generate something meaningful out of that for testing. Because I feel like it's problematic if you look at it bottom up, that the developers test how they implemented the features, but rather these sort of behavior should be tested however the end user perceives the application behavior. So it's a top to bottom approach, not a bottom up, because we have a lot of unnecessary details in the implementation.
Exactly.
I hope that people are happy reusing their machines, but I sincerely hope that there is one day that we actually write it the other way.
Yeah. And so you can imagine just like pointing the algorithm at a website and being like, here's my app. As a user, try to figure out just all the different ways that other users might use the app and generate a state machine from that instead of the code. So basically, just like you're saying, treat the code as a black box and derive the user behavior from just everything that the user can do and create that state machine from that. I think that's going to be extremely powerful.
Every company needs a secret algorithm, right?
Yes.
This is our secret algorithm. You can't take this away from us, Congress. Yeah.
Yep.
So tangentially related in terms of integrating and with tests. Mike C asks, have anyone used XState tests with Storybooks interactive stories yet? Any tips on easily generating or displaying storybook views for each of the states would be greatly appreciated. I know that's quite specific, but has anyone tried using it with Storybook?
Yes,
go ahead.
I have actually. I actually ran into some issues where Storybook itself is heading towards a model where it's doing a lot of static analysis on stories, which means that they're trying to parse your code and say, okay, there's this story, this story, this story that you've added. So stories in Storybook, for instance, you can have a page which is, or let's say a button, which can either be disabled, let's say, or enabled, or being hovered, or things like that. Those are all different stories in a storybook, essentially. And when you look at the storybook, you can look at the component in different states, basically, and see how it looks, which is very powerful. Dynamically generating those stories with XState seems like an amazing match, because you can generate the model for your component, and you can say, okay, my component can be in all these different states, and you just got to walk through all these events and sort of make it look like that, basically. Annoyingly, Storybook is going towards this statically analyzable model, where they look at all the code that you've written and then kind of only recompile like certain things based on what has changed, which means that dynamically generating stories is not going to be an option going forward, which makes me really sad. I did have a long conversation about this in the Storybook Discord, actually. I don't know if anyone else has any experience with playing around with this.
So, yeah, I completely agree with your sentiments on like it just being difficult for Storybook to represent these things. There is actually something new that I discovered this month coming to Storybook, and it's called interactive stories. And so that actually makes these kinds of things possible. With before with Storybook, it's like a static representation of your component, and you have to specify every variant of that. But with interactive stories, now you could actually do things. And before, this wasn't possible. So with this, you could like provide a testing model for your component, and you could even have Storybook actually execute each event and do things in your actual component and show it at every state. So I have to play around with this more. It is in beta, but I think something like that is possible.
So that essentially means we need to map one-to-one between components and machines, right? For generating the permutations.
Maybe.
You would basically have a machine that drives each Storybook page, essentially.
Yes.
So you would say this is like the button machine, for instance. That this is what you can do with all the buttons. And when you move from, let's say let's imagine that the button is not hovered at the start, and then you want to move to the hovered state. To achieve the hover event, you would use the interactive stories beta to move the cursor and hover it, basically.
Yeah, got it.
Which is quite exciting, but I still don't think it's possible, unfortunately. I think it might be possible if we do like a really deep integration, but yeah.
Yeah, it's worth playing around with. And even without Storybook, we have some really awesome plans for like just rendering the UI inside of the editor, which is possible. So just have to play around with that a little bit more. Definitely next year. This year.
We had another question, but I think it's kind of more of a suggestion, saying any ideas or ways to decorate diagrams to enhance visualization for test reports. So I could take a machine and test results and then do something, for example, push something in Meta and get a colorful diagram where everyone can see the green, red, other states and transitions. I'd say that's maybe a feature suggestion.
Yeah, this has been something that we've been thinking about in the editor too. In fact, the designs we have, and you'll see a sneak preview today, but some of the previous designs, we have panels at the bottom for visualizing, editing, simulating, and testing, and also analytics and things like that. And so that testing tab is intended to be something where you have your visual state chart, and as you're testing the application, you see different paths light up, and then you see if there's an error somewhere, something just shows red. So, I mean, that's definitely something we've been thinking about, and something that's going to be coming in the future.
It's going to be so cool.
Mm.
So this is something that I've really been looking forward to since Matt suggested it about half an hour ago. Matt suggested, someone asked in our modeling help channel, which we have on Discord, about a issue that they were having with modeling, and Matt suggested, why doesn't he show you how he might model it live in this live stream?
Yeah, let's do this. I'm going to move. By the way, I've got two computers, so even though I'm now over here, but if I look over there, I am actually looking at you. So apologies for losing eye
Don't
contact, all
cheat,
that
Matt.
stuff.
Don't cheat.
I'm cheating a little bit. Come on, I've only got so much screen real estate. I'm not in 4K yet. Okay, so this is what we're building. Martin Klepsch came and sort of asked a question in our Discord in Modeling Help, which you're all free to do, by the way. You can all join our Discord and sort of enjoy the benefit of the community and everything. It's a really great place to hang out. And he's modeling something like this. Now, this is sort of hard to read from this description, but it's kind of like imagine you're building an app and you want to show a tutorial. And you want that tutorial to show kind of little pop-ups around the screen. And the idea is that any component in your app can sort of say, okay, I want to show popover 1, or I want to show popover 2, or I want to show popover 3. And what should happen is that these popovers should show in a single modal, where you can say either back or next, and kind of cycle through the popovers. So it's like a tutorial screen, basically, that can be kind of sourced from within the app. And there are sort of a few extra requirements that we can do. So you need to be able to like hide all popovers, show all popovers, close the popovers, go back and next, etc. But does this make sense as a set of requirements? Laura, I'm going to ask you as my sort of spokesperson for the group. Does this make sense so far? You got any questions?
I think it makes sense so far.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Okay. Okay, cool. So the idea here is we need to model this in an XState machine. Some extra sort of things that we need to bear in mind is that we need to, when show popover 1, 2, 3 is called, we want to delay it a little bit. So like throttle it by by 500 milliseconds. Because if it goes bam, 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 then those little 3 dots, it sort of will just look a bit clunky if it's like showing all sorts of popovers at the same time. If we have like 3 popovers showing at once, and then something else says like show popover 4, then it should kind of smoothly go onto the end. So we'll add a new little dot here. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay. When new popovers are shown, add them to the list. I think that's everything so far. I think that's everything. So we're going to jump straight into modeling this. And what I like to do actually before I start modeling something is I like to think about, even before I think about the behavior, I like to think about what data structures we're going to need in order to sort of like represent the data and all the things that we need here. So let me think, who's a good person to turn to for this? David, I want to call on you, which is, imagine that we have like a context up here. If I sort of say, okay, got a bit of code, got context. What do we need inside this context in order to represent some of these data structures that we've got here? What's immediately coming to mind for you?
Well, yeah, putting me on the spot here. We need something representing just the popovers that we have. So like just sort of a queue or something like that.
Yeah, let's say popover queue, for instance, which would be like, let's imagine they're just like an ID. So let's, I'm going to declare these in TypeScript. So it's just like a string like this, but we might have like a popover type or something. What else might we need?
Indication of the current popover.
Current popover, which I think is going to be like this, because we can have like no popover showing as well.
Right. Yeah.
It could be the number, right? Pointing to the index.
Yeah, that's true. Current pop. Yeah, because I don't think this queue is going to go down. Yeah, let's say current popover index, which is a number.
Good call.
Anderist, have we missed anything?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, nice. All right. So what we're going to do then?
Matt, where do we store the current popover elements or refs to them?
I think in the popover queue.
But I thought popover queue is like the queue of popovers that are scheduled for show. to be shown.
Mm-hmm. But you're thinking, yeah, that's what I'm imagining. Does that make sense?
So the actual popovers are in the UI, not really a state machine concern.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but you still need a ref to them to be able to tell them to show themselves. Right?
Oh yeah, let's ignore that for now. Let's imagine that they just come from the context magically, and they the UI knows what to do based on the context.
Yeah.
So we'll treat this machine as nice and pure for now, not worrying about refs or the DOM or anything like that. Okay, so we've got this, and we'll just keep that in our head for now. And let's pull over to the Stately editor. And I'm inside the registry now, which is the new registry. I'm going to create a system, and this is going to be the app that contains this. So let's call this educational app. I'm going to save this, and we're going to add a new machine to the system, which is going to be the popover machine. Popover machine. So now we need to start thinking about behavior. And we need to sort of go, okay, what states can we be in first, and what events sort of lead to different changes here? So we know that there's going to be a state where the popover is not shown. So let's just call this popover not showing, like that. And we know that there's going to be a state which is going to be popover showing. Now, let's see, what sort of events are going to result in going from here to here? We know that we can, from our requirements, we know that when new popovers are shown, we need to add them to the list. So we've got show popover 1, show popover 2, show popover 3. God, I cannot count the number of times I've said popover already. I'm not sure I like it. So we know that we have an event somewhere that says show popover. Can anyone think of another word for popover, by the way, just so I don't lose my mind?
Modal?
Modal.
Dialogue.
Modal's good, yeah.
Dialogue. All right, cool. I'll try and there's already 4 popovers. I know 8 popovers on the screen. 9. Anyway. Okay, so where is this show popover got to go then? So what are we going to do when this show popover thing comes in? David, what do you think?
Oh, wow, I clicked the wrong button. Anyway, yeah, so whenever we have more than 0 popovers, like we should transition to popover showing. So,
yes, I think so. Yeah. So show popover, let's go from here to here, and we have this show popover, and now the popover is showing. Now there's something missing here, which is we need to kind of throttle by 500 milliseconds before we show the modal. So I'm going to add in a new state here, which is going to be throttling before showing. Before showing. And I'm going to redirect this from here to here, which is I just grab the anchor point and move it to here, which is rather nice. And now we're going to say, we're going to go to here, and it's going to be after 500 milliseconds. So we just say after 500 milliseconds, nice defaults. So we've got this, show popover, throttling before showing. We're also probably going to need this show popover event to, because we're going to need it when we're in this state, but also if we receive other events while we're there, it's also going to still be in this state, because currently we've got show popover and then we can't receive that event anymore, and then we're only going to ever show one. So we're going to need to add another one, which is going to be a self event like this. And self events look like this. So we have show middle. And now, anytime that this receives another one, it's going to add it to the context. Or rather, it's not going to yet because we haven't added it as an action. So let's say add popover to context. Or we can probably say queue there might be a better name. Add popover to queue, add another action there. Add popover to queue. Note we've got a little autocomplete here so that it shows the actions. We'll save that. Okay, so throttling before showing, and then we have popover showing. So now we're in this state, basically, where we have this sort of sense of progress, and we have a back and a next button and a close button. So what's going to happen when we close the popovers? Where are we going to go? David?
Well, my initial thought is like having an always transition like when we reach 0. So 0 popovers showing now, popovers are no longer showing.
That makes sense. So we would go like, let's see. So when I'm thinking though, because we can go back and next, we don't want to destroy the popovers in the popover queue as soon as they're finished with. That makes sense. We actually want to keep them around so that we can navigate back and forward.
Yeah. So once we reach the end, go back to popover not showing.
Yeah, got it. So popover not showing, we've got a close event like that. Name close. And we're also going to need back and forward as well. So let's say we've got back event, and this is going to go show an action, because this is probably going to be an assign, for instance, right? It's going to be like, let's see, go to, what am I saying? Yeah, go to previous popover. And then we've got a next one here, which is going to be next actions go to next popover. And then when we get to the end, I guess what we're going to have to do is go all the way back to here and say, let's say popover is complete is an event like this. So far, Laura, how's that looking?
It looks good to me, from what I can understand.
Yeah, I think so. Let's see who we've got. We've got, you could say, overarching two-dimensional manifold instead. I do quite like that. I quite like that fancy. We've got, okay, Eric's raised something. So if you get a show popover event every 499 milliseconds for 5 seconds, none of them will show until 500 milliseconds after the last one, edge case. Well, that's interesting because I'm not sure that's true, actually, because it depends.
Think Eric was actually speaking in relation to Martin saying, as in we want to delay the showing until there have been no show popover events for 500 milliseconds.
Aha, yeah. So I think Eric's right.
In which case, yeah.
In which case, yeah, I see. So yeah, I don't think. And if we were to do that, we're kind of basically talking about the difference between a deduplication and a debounce, I think, possibly. Which
yes, Martin did wonder whether debounce was more appropriate.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I've been missing out this entire chat. Let's imagine that we say that 500 milliseconds is the maximum time we want to wait before showing the popover, in which case this current implementation makes sense. We're missing one thing, which is how do we handle the show popover event when the popover is already showing? I'm thinking that when we're in here, we probably need another throttle because we don't want to, when we're inside the popover, suddenly have boop, 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 boop. We maybe want to just show them in 500-second increments or maybe second increments or something. So for that, we're going to need another throttle inside here. So let's add a substate. We've got an idle substate. We've got a throttling substate. And we've got, I think that's all we need, actually.
I think we didn't even need the throttle outside. I mean, you could schedule right away, and the popover showing could just schedule by throttling.
Maybe, but then you might get...
Because, there's a problem here. I mean, if there is no popover and you want to show the first one, it will still be throttled for half a second, whereas you want it to be immediate.
But I think that's okay if you're showing like an animation in between, let's say. Because it can still say inside throttling before showing. Let's imagine that we add like a tag. I think actually tags aren't shown in the viz, but let's imagine that we've got a show popover.
And that could mirror like a delay transition in the CSS, for example.
Yeah, exactly. But let's model this internal popover throttle first, where here when we have the event show this, then we wait for 500 milliseconds and then go back. So we've got after here, and then blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, and then when we're inside throttling as well, we need to do the show popover thing again. Show popover, and now we're good. Oh yeah, just add the actions on there as well. Go to queue, add popover to queue. So this is pretty complex. And it's kind of crazy how fast we were able to build this, and how lucid it is as a diagram. This is interesting. We're getting some good feedback here, which is Eric saying the self-transition event diagram is confusing to me, specifically the show popover coming from nowhere into throttling.
Now, is that the design or just the actual modeling? If Eric wants to.
Yeah, if he wants to come back.
It's not necessarily obvious that it's a self-transition just from looking, is it?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, we could tweak that. We can make it look like a little loop or something like that.
Yeah, this is because it's kind of a different type of. So this one, for instance, you might be saying.
That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Bottom left.
Yeah. So it's interesting this because we're sort of choosing flowchart semantics here, or at least this was actually my idea, the arrow coming directly from the event to this. We're sort of choosing flowchart semantics here over state chart semantics, because the state chart way of doing it would be to add like a line coming from here, going to the event and going back, which is what you're used to in the viz, for instance. And we may go back to this actually, but this is something that I quite like, because to someone who doesn't understand state charts, you can see that the show popover thing, no matter what happens here, it will still go to this event. It will still affect it. So it's interesting for starting off different flows and things like that. It's kind of cool. So yeah, I get what Eric's saying.
Yeah, and we could do best of both worlds. We could have that same line just doubled, and one arrow going to, one arrow going from. There you go. There's your loop.
And I was going to say maybe the little icon that that we have could be more like a self-transition, more traditional self-transition style icon as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
just designing on the fly.
I admit that I could get used to this system. It's just different. Yes.
Yeah. And I love this comment too. This is a point at which I usually npm install something obscure and manage it through like a bunch of Booleans. I think this tool will help me a great deal. And that's exactly the point. Like, we want this to be easier than even writing Booleans and jumping into code, because it's like, okay, let's design this. Like if I were to open an Excalibur or something and just start making boxes and arrows, but you're actually coding, right, Matt?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You are actually coding because you can export this. So let's export it. Let's export it to JSON. And I'm going to just pop over to the, the stately viz. I'm going to paste this into here. And we've got our popover machine all working. We've got all the after transitions working. We can go to the show popover thing. We can go to popovers complete. Show popover, we see that everything's working. It's executable. We've got back and next all working. And we could go further here because we've got our idea of how to implement the context here. And we know that we need to implement things like adding things to the queue, like adding all the assign actions. And implementing the assign actions themselves currently aren't possible in this editor. It is something that we're planning for the future, though.
Yes, for sure.
For sure. Because the idea here is once you've got the assigns working, that's kind of like the internal logic for the machine sort of sorted. And you can then just go and plug it into your app, hopefully fully type safe, and then implement the stuff that you actually need inside your app in your app. But for the sake of brevity, I'll leave off actually implementing the assign actions. And if anyone's got any questions here about the implementation or anything like that, then please fire them away now. Laura, have you got any questions about the way we implemented this, or any decisions that were made, or anything like that?
None coming in, I think, from anyone else right now.
I meant you personally, not you
from
as an
me
avatar
personally.
For the chat. Yeah.
I mean, perfectly honestly, I'm just sitting here like, this is so cool. when you see it like imported into the viz, it looks so cool. So and it makes sense to me, and that's what's so great is this visual medium is. While I'm a developer, I'm not the most confident when it comes to modeling and things like this, and so the idea of being able to do it visually is incredibly appealing.
Yeah, for sure.
I love this comment. Sorry.
No, go ahead, David.
Like just like what Laura was saying, I hope I could make it a collaborative effort with the design team as well. Like Yeah, I feel pretty confident showing this to designers and being like, hey, here's our logic. What do you think?
Yep, pretty extraordinary. And even if you had designs based on this, let's say, and everyone was working from the same hymn sheet, very, very exciting. Martin's actually in the chat. This is the guy we're designing this for. And he says, one thing I'd be curious is the implementation of a global show hide toggle. Yeah, cool.
Ooh, good question.
Great question, because we need to be able to show all and hide all, basically. So let's add something here, which is we're going to need to transition kind of, it's going to be a global transition, I think. So it's going to come from the parent. And let's implement the close all thing first. The way we do that is we drag down from the parent up here, and we can say, I think when we close all, we're going to default to popover not showing. So that's going to go there, and we'll say close all. And then when we say open all, I guess what we want to do is, I'm sort of thinking, what should we do when we have the open all when we're in throttling before showing? I guess we just force it open, I think.
Yeah.
How about we add like a extra history state that we just go to when we get the show hide globally and gets back to wherever the machine was, just run some actions.
Ooh, but that might catch the history of the popover not showing. So the show all might end up going to the popover not showing state. I'm thinking, my initial thought was, and maybe the simplest is just to do this, is to add a show all here.
Martin reckons it should restore whatever it was before.
So history makes sense.
Yeah.
I think so, but I think that most of what.
But you're saying if you get stuck in the middle of the throttle, then you're just waiting and there's nothing there.
Yeah, but like the history when transitioning back to the machine can also schedule a send event internally that tells it where to go. I mean, you're never stuck as long as you send an internal event, right? Based on the logic you get.
Yes, I think so. I think because most of the things that we're worried about restoring are actually not in the state, they're actually in the context. So it's restoring this popover queue, restoring the current popover index. So I think there would be more logic in the assigns there based on the show all. So I guess we just add, for now, we can just add like a loose action, which is like restore whatever was here before. And we can kind of figure that out later.
We need a way to comment to-dos and fix me's in the editor.
Well, here we go, to-do. Yeah, we can say to-do. Come back to this later. Absolutely.
Yeah. Another feature.
I should say, Mitch asked just while we've just been attaching the new events there, what does it mean when an event is attached to the top of the machine window? I think it means when it's attached to the parent.
Yeah, exactly. Let's export this and just see what this looks like. So export the popover machine. Yeah, that's copied. And it's here. So what this means, you can see the show all and close all events here. This means that they're global events to the popover machine. So you can see, let's see if that's in states. I think it's in on down here. Yeah, here we are. So on close all, this will happen whenever you're in the machine. So whenever the process is running, whenever you're in this state, essentially, which is the global state, then close all and show all will be possible because they're coming from there. Let's see. I imagine you can drag an arrow up there too to send parents.
Race condition.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Yeah, I think, let me think. I think send parent might be handled differently. We currently don't have a send parent action kind of available in the editor. But yeah, in theory, you could, in theory, that could be possible. I'm not sure. Yeah, David, maybe you can talk more about this.
Yeah, so I mean, these are actually a couple different things. I think he's talking about like a node sending an event to like targeting the parents node, which right now we've currently disabled. I mean, yeah, we'll think about use cases for that. But as far as send parent, yeah, there's going to be special built-in actions here for being able to communicate with different machines. And especially if the machines are within your system, then you have like built-in ways of seeing which events can be sent to those machines and things like that. But yeah, haven't gone there yet.
Yep. I like this
Martin. Oh, So we're all pressing buttons back here, and it's
You go for it, Laura. Sorry,
too
you
many
have the
admins in the kitchen.
in
Collab
nautical
mode.
terms. You have the con. You go for it. You do whatever you like.
Martin was asking, I was also thinking that visibility could be a parallel state. Maybe that's an interesting approach.
Yeah, we can demonstrate how parallel states look. Let's imagine that we have a visibility state here, and inside the visibility state we have, I don't know, 2 states. You can make them parallel by changing the type to parallel here. Visibility, blah, 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 and then these states will sort of operate on their own as compound states. I'm not sure if parallel states would help us here, though.
Yeah, I think basically the visibility should be derived as states based on, you should basically write a selector for it out of the interpreter to see which one you should make visible or not.
Yes, I think so. I do get what he means. There's kind of like 2 processes happening here at the same time, which is like the throttle and the visibility. And the way that they sort of interact are interesting because you could have one like communicating with the other. But I think just having them all like this makes it easier to reason about, curiously. In the end, I use a selector to determine if a popover should be shown. That selector could take into account visibility. I think this is... Yeah,
that's pretty useful when you're using frameworks like React. But like if you were just using pure JavaScript and DOM, then I agree you could have a DOM machine being parallel with it to run the actions like showing and hiding.
Yep. I wanted to draw attention to Eric's question as well, which is, are we trending towards this as an event sentence case? Yeah, I am actually.
You mean instead of screaming case?
Instead of screaming
like
snake
we're
case,
all
yeah.
used to in Redux. Yeah, and this is I actually really appreciate the way that Matt has written these, is because it should really just read like like prose, because that this is the way that your project managers will talk about it, and there's really no restriction on like, oh no, you can't have spaces or special characters in here, except the dots. Don't put dots in there. But yeah, it should be easily readable. And we're also thinking about in the future, like just putting mock-ups, and you could also add descriptions as well, which I think you've demonstrated with that to do in the show all. And yeah, I want to mention too that another feature that we have planned is commenting and collaboration mode, like the exact same thing that we're doing here on the stream for you, and everyone chiming in with like, I think this should be this, or oh, what if this happens? Like, that's a perfect use case for actually collaborating and commenting on the machine itself. I mean, imagine trying to do this with code instead of a diagram. Like, I don't even know how we do it,
Yep, it's crazy. And having collaboration is going to be so exciting for this sort of tool. Hopefully into next year we'll be thinking about that.
Yes.
Eric says, can you model a callback service? What kind of rectangle does that look like? We're kind of modeling just a single machine here, this popover machine. If we want to invoke a service, let's say we have like an invoked event down here, we can declare a service that we want to use. So for instance, let's say we have a, I don't know, make fetch or something. Then if we have a state down here, which is kind of like our success state, and a state down here, which has a errored state, then we can drag from here and we can say, okay, when we're done, go there. When we're errored, go here. And that's kind of the way that we're modeling things at the moment, is just by using the basic semantics. So we're not claiming to say that you can like implement the make fetch quite yet inside the editor, but this would be something that you add as a an implementation when you then import this into your project.
Mm-hmm. And in the future, like you'll be able to add built-in integrations, or maybe even do inline code and like make a Lambda function or something like that directly inside of here, which that's going to be really useful for at least workflows and automations and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. Our adventures into using the Monaco editor and things like that, they've been really, really useful for this. And just being able to add like type-safe code snippets or things like that, I think that's just so exciting.
And eventually one day will come that we can just install Matt's popover machine here from the registry directly.
Exactly.
Yeah,
import
imagine.
by URL. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw that demo in Framer Motion, and I'm like, we gotta have that for here.
So I think
Well,
that's the end of my demo, Laura.
It's a fabulous demo. While we've got it all nice and visible there, hey, David, do you want to tell folks what's coming up for the beta testers?
Yeah, sure. So we are, we've been working really hard. Matt has been making a ton of awesome PRs here, and the rest of the team as well. We are planning on opening this up to beta users on Monday. So after this weekend, right now, if you've played around with the, I guess the URLs, you might have seen like beta access required. So we're going to be letting in people one by one to actually try this out. And at the same time, we're going to be adding more and more features. I think we have our MVP features pretty much complete at this point. So now's the time for user feedback, and I'm just making this as awesome as possible.
And if you haven't signed up to be a beta tester yet, if you want to sign up on our newsletter, which you can do from the stately.ai homepage, you'll get information when we open it up to more people. But if you want to get in there first, you should sign up to our Discord, as you said before, and just let us know, give us a shout in whichever channel you like, and we'll add you to the list. Now, I wanted to just quickly go back to the discussion that we were having before about testing, because Cedric asked a question and I wanted to make sure that we answered it. Do we have any GitHub examples where testing is done with XState? Because I'm not sure whether we do. Can anyone point us to somewhere where they could see some examples in action?
Well, we do have registry, but that's not open source.
I'll have to dig them up and put them on the resources in the documentation. But yeah, there are examples of people using XState test. There's also examples of people using XState to actually drive the application and then testing it using Cypress, like just a normal way. If you want to see how, like, if you don't want to use XState test, but you just want to use some other testing technique, just seeing how that works with XState. And so that's the Cypress real world test app. They created one, and they're using state machines all over the place. So that's definitely one to take a look at.
Marco asked, do you have a timeline when you want to release the new Viz and other updates? Sorry, I just joined.
So if by visualizer you mean the editor, we're opening up for beta next week. And as far as general release, we're thinking end of January, early February, something like that. As far as the visualizer, that's a ready release, but we are going to be making updates. And in fact, we just cut a release for, I think, version 0.5.0, right, Farzad? Yeah. Some more features slowly coming into the visualizer.
Oh, that's very exciting. We've got, Marco, you also missed, if you sign up on our Discord, you'll be able to just let us know that you want to be a part of the beta, and we'll get you on there. And I'm just seeing we've got lots and lots of questions and suggestions going on now. Mitch says, I kind of want to use a generated version of this instead of an automated screenshot with failing end-to-end tests with something like Cypress. Valentin would love to see an XState router, but with due time.
Working on it.
Now I'm just making sure if there was anything else that we wanted to cover this week. Oh, yes. Farzad, do you want to tell people about what we've got coming up with the blog?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So we've been working on the official engineering blog, or as Matt says, English blog, for the past few weeks. And we got it almost ready for the MVP, because we realized that there's a lot of need in the community for the content that we might have to write about. So we're just going to scope down the MVP and publish it, and just to start writing right away. If it's up to me, I'm going to go on with MVP for the next year, but there's a ton of interactivity and productivity features that we can add to the blog that are kind of new, but the content is the more important thing right now. So we're thinking about publishing the MVP at the end of this sprint, which is 2 weeks from now.
And if there's anything that you want us to write about specifically, send us your ideas. We'd love to know what you want to read about. Like, we're thinking the kinds of things that wouldn't necessarily be covered by documentation, things like interesting use cases, best practices, stuff like that.
Yeah, we can actually go with like the same modeling example that Matt did today in the blog. We could write about, we're actually planning to, we're noting down the TypeScript questions or modeling questions or React questions you're asking in the community in a single note, and we're planning to write about them all at once. Hopefully, if the time permits. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll be answering everything at once, but we've certainly got a lot there to keep us going. And I also wanted to mention that there will be, for the first time next week, no office hours, because it is the 26th of November and all of the wonderful folks over in the US will be having a holiday break. So we thought we would postpone and bring more office hours to the week after and encourage you to actually have a good holiday.
Play around with the visualizer, the editor, whatever during that time.
Or spend time with your family and friends.
Of course. That too.
How dare
when
you,
when you get sick of them, you could always escape to code.
Or introduce them to it. That could be fun.
That could actually be fun.
Doing demos of the visualizer to your family over the
there was
dinner
actually
table.
an interesting tweet today that someone said he's using XState for scheduling the cooking for the holidays and coming up with recipes or something like that. You can probably do that for the Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
He said he was scheduling all the sides that he was making for the Thanksgiving dinner.
That's amazing.
I mean, recipes are basically state machines, and they're not always linear. Like, you could do two things at the same time, mix the dry ingredients, mix the wet ingredients. You have parallel states there. Like, yeah, that's really interesting, actually.
Oh, Bake Off would be really interesting if they started showing the state machines of what was going on at the same time as watching people do the eggs.
Justice for Jürgen. Got it. That's such a narrow joke. Only very few people
That
really
is.
get that.
I got it though.
Good.
Is this British Bake Off?
Everyone likes to watch Great British Bake Off. It's very good. But yeah, they have lovely illustrations of the cakes. They should be having state machines for the recipes too.
Oh yeah.
Anyone else have anything else they wanted to share this week? Well, I think we had a fantastic, fun-packed, nice long office hours this week. I think we'll be doing more modeling demonstrations in the future, because I don't know about you, I found that really useful. Yeah. And we will catch up with you all in 2 weeks' time. I wish I had the date of that off the top of my head. But 2 weeks from now, it's a Friday. You'll know it when it happens.
Yes.
We will see you all again then. Bye-bye.
See you all.
Bye, everyone.
Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle.